Everyone.
Hello and welcome to Do You See What I See? I'm Yolanda Nava. Today's guest is a feminist, activist, e- Episcopalian, theologian, and priest, Carter Heyward. Welcome, Carter Heyward.
Thank you, Yolanda. It's a pleasure to be back.
Well, we talked last December about the many issues, and we talked about your book, Seven Deadly Sins. The seventh sin is gun violence. And we also talked about Christian nationalism, crypto-fascism, and perhaps you just give a quick recap of that, just so we pick up where we were, and then we can continue with our conversation today.
Okay, in 2022, I published a book called The Seven Deadly Sins of White Christian Nationalism, a call to action, and that book has gotten, unfortunately, ever more timely because white Christian nationalism is now uh, in
Okay.
full bloom in the United States of America, as it is in other parts of the world. And borrowing the term from Dorothea Zola, my very beloved friend and teacher from the 1980s and 90s and early part of this century, Dorothea coined the term Christo-fascism to describe what she believed was beginning to creep into the United States really as early as the 1980s with the emergence of Ronald Reagan's trickle-down economy, where the gap between the rich and the poor began to grow, which is where it really became quite dramatic and has become that ever since, until very recently when under the presidency of Joe Biden, he was trying very much to correct that. But of course, it's just gone out of control with Donald Trump now. But anyhow, Christo-fascism I see as the motive behind white Christian nationalism, which is the goal of people like Trump and Stephen Miller and I suppose people like Pam Bondi and Kristi Noem and others to have primarily white Christian men of great wealth rule this country and set its rules and win its elections. And hence the great effort being uh, mounted right now by the Trump administration to basically make sure that the coming elections do not put Democrats back in charge, because the Republicans need to stay in charge to have a white Christian nationalist nation. So that's really what we were beginning to talk about last time.
Well, that is an important thing to note, and I don't think that many people are aware of that concept because it's been sold so effectively, going back to the 50s. I can remember, some of the things that were going on there.
Yeah.
But today I'd like to look at your very important power talk that you delivered in 2024 at the 50th commemoration of the ordination of women priests in Philadelphia. And that power talk is extraordinary in its intention, in its intelligence, in its inspiration, and its call to courage. So, would you go into some of the talking ideas and points that you covered in that very important?
Well, let me see if I can recall them. I it was kind of a summary of everything I was thinking and believing strongly to be the case at that moment, which is that the Philadelphia ordination, which we were celebrating on that occasion, wasn't simply an occasion where 11 women got ordained to the priesthood of the church. I mean, that was great. That was fun. It was a celebration. It was a wonderful breakthrough and a big change in Christian tradition, particularly in Anglicanism. But our chief motive was not simply to ordain women, but rather to begin to transform the church itself, so that the church itself would become increasingly committed to being a justice-making voice in our society. And by ordaining women in Philadelphia in 1974, the church had taken that stand basically about itself. But our motive, really, truth to tell, was that we as Christian leaders, priests, bishops, and others, lay people, should be out making our voices known today on the streets, from the pulpits, in classrooms, on on presentations like this, saying, people, it's not bringing religion into politics. It is using our faith and a God of justice, love, to try to get our society to do the right thing by including those who've previously been excluded, by building structures of kindness and compassion in the society itself. I mean, this is what Jesus of Nazareth was urging his followers to espouse when he was alive, that the poor should receive food, and the government needs to help the poor eat and to have housing, and uh, and to have good education, and not to be left out of the basic resources, healthcare, for example. And this should be the church's mission. Um, and just yesterday, for example, I was interviewed on NPR, it hadn't been broadcast yet, but about the new Archbishop of Canterbury, who, as you know, is a woman, Sarah Mullally. And the interviewer asked me what I would say to her, if I were asked. And I said, oh, I would really encourage her to be a spiritual leader for the people, not just for the church, but for the people of the Anglican Communion and the people of England, which is where she's located, but to be a justice maker above all. And there are several, particularly William Temple, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury during World War II, who really did preach outward. He didn't get consumed with inner church stuff. He really preached. He embodied a church that was concerned about the world. And that's what I hope this new Archbishop of Canterbury, Sarah Mullally, will do. And that's what I have tried to do very imperfectly and very unevenly and not all that great much of the time with my own life and ministry. But it certainly is what the 50th anniversary celebration was an attempt to celebrate, was that very effort to be a church for the world and for justice in the world.
Well, it was a very powerful talk, and you drew from so much history, and you drew from biblical quotes. There was one from Isaiah
Mm-hmm.
that you drew from, and I don't remember the quote right in the moment, but it was you were talking also about the uh, the liberal, the liberal church, the transformation that can take place politically, and how we can use the faith and the principles that are in the Bible and the teachings of Jesus Christ, of compassion and love and meekness and kindness,
Mm-hmm.
love for the stranger.
Right.
And that is all very important. Go elaborate on that, please.
Well, every Christian, everyone who calls herself or himself a Christian, has some kind of connection to the Bible. We may know it very poorly, we may know it very well, but every single Christian person leans on certain passages and certain themes in the Bible, because the Bible's filled with many contradictions. Forgiving your enemies on the one hand and turning the other cheek, and yet also you see people going to war with their enemies, and so you have all these different things going on in the Bible. So, from a feminist liberation perspective, which is where I'm coming from, uh, the Bible is really a book about people struggling for liberation of the oppressed themselves struggling for their own liberation, but the rest of us also struggling for the liberation of the oppressed and for freedom, for example, of enslaved people. Slavery in the United States was a huge event for Christians in America, because people had to be on one side or the other. Either you were with the enslavers or you were with those who had been enslaved, and you were working for their freedom. And so the Christian church is divided at that time about which side they were on. I'd like to hope that I would have been on the side with people working for the freedom of people who were enslaved. We all, in retrospect, probably most of us would say that we wish that we could have been there and done that. Now, would we really have been there? I don't know. But I like to think of myself as working for liberation, and certainly in my own lifetime, this is what I have tried to do. for people who are working for liberation, the Beatitudes, for example, are hugely important. And these are in the books of both Matthew and Luke, where Jesus is part of the Sermon on the Mount or the Sermon on the Plain in Luke. And it's basically where he says, "Blessed are the poor. Blessed are those who blessed are you when men persecute and reject you, for yours is the realm of God or the kingdom of God," in Jesus's language. The Beatitudes are to me among the most important parts of all Scripture, just like the Isaiah passage you talk about that I talked about in my sermon, which was where Isaiah is basically Jesus is quoting Isaiah and saying, you'll know me when you're feeding the hungry, when you're liberating the oppressed, when you are standing for justice. That is when you'll see me. That's when you know me, and that comes right out of the prophets. And so it's the God of the prophets, the God of the Beatitudes, Jesus standing with the poor. This is where Christians need to be. And for Christians who present Jesus as someone carrying an AK-47 or whatever kind of long gun that is, I mean, that is such blasphemy and that is such a lie. And what has happened is that in the white Christian nationalist movement in this country, people like Stephen Miller and Donald Trump are using a Jesus that they have concocted out of their own minds, because such a Jesus never existed. Jesus was a meek, mild person who got angry at injustice. That's when he got angry. But he never, ever picked up a weapon. He knew the power of love, the power of nonviolent resistance, which is what he practiced himself when he was accused by Pilate and right before he was crucified. He just basically, he refused to fight back. He just spoke truth to power. That's what he did. And that's what we need to be doing, is speaking truth in every possible arena to power and let the chips fall where they may.
You also had an op-ed piece that you did in the same year that was very powerful, in which you did speak truth to power, and you titled it, "What is Truth?" What was that article about? What were you saying there?
Um, well, I'm sorry that I did not prepare that for this. I mean, I would need to go back and find it. Can you remind me?
Well, I can remind you what I thought that I had in that "What is Truth?" that I learned as a child, that God is truth and love. Those are part of the definitions of God, and the truth is what is right and godly, I would say, and that piece was very. It was a call. It was done with the civil rights group, and you put that letter together, or that opinion piece together, and it
Right.
was about a call to action. It was about a call to looking at what truth is, and it is speaking out and speaking up,
Yeah,
and yeah.
it's speaking of we get nowhere by denying the truth. In other words, if something terrible has happened, such as the murders in Minnesota of those people, or such as what's going on now in taking immigrants, the immigrant community, and putting them in detention centers, these are terrible things. And if we intend to speak truth to power, we should not deny that these terrible things are happening, but rather speak, tell the truth about them, which is what we're doing when we say these people were murdered, these people are being put in detention centers, and these terrible things are happening. That is speaking truth. And the motive is love. The motive is we connect with these people who are being persecuted, and we're saying, this is wrong. To say this is wrong is speaking truth to power. To say uh, that people need to be protesting and resisting our government is speaking truth to power. And it's naming reality. It's not denying reality. I mean, I think too many, not just Christians, but people who consider themselves spiritual often just look the other way because it's just too painful to look at what's really happening. And that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help people to to turn away from what is in fact going on, which is what the truth is, and refuse to name it. So to speak truth is to name reality, and if it's oppressive and hurtful to people, to speak truthfully about it, which is to speak lovingly about it and to say, this is not of God. This is not what Jesus would have us do.
Well, we're working on that every day, I think, many of us. And what I think the beauty of what has been going on, especially in Minnesota and elsewhere, is just such an outpouring of people really, really practicing their faith.
Oh, I totally agree. I
Yeah.
think outpouring in Minnesota, the people on the streets, in my opinion, the protesters in Minnesota should collectively receive the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, those people really have tried to bring peace and truth and love and justice into the public square. They've done their best, and God bless them. And God has been the power behind them for sure. I believe that with my whole being.
Well, it is, and we need more of that. But I think it's true faith. I love the definition of faith in the King James Version of the Bible. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. And I think about faith also when I look at the Constitution, the preamble to the Constitution, which really is an ideal, an idea, a vision. It is an intention. We hold these truths as that's a declaration of it, but the
Yeah,
combination of the two, we hold these truths as self-evident, and they list them all in
yeah.
order to arrive at a more perfect union.
Yes.
And I've used that arriving at a more perfect union in some of the, things that I've written, because it is a process and it's something that as an intention, the preamble in our founding documents are an intention. And in my spiritual practice, intention is a form of spiritually affirmative prayer. So
Mhm.
what I ask is the only time we, sing some of these songs that might be in church or not, we're not doing it in school. I used to say the Pledge of Allegiance every day, and I'd hold my hand over my heart and keep it there while I sang God Bless America. That
Yeah.
was daily affirmation and prayer that we were acting out every day in school. And most places where you had any kind of public event, that's not happening as much today. And in fact, last July when I was at the service, we always have a commemoration of 4th of July on the Sunday that's closest to that holiday. And I was we say the Pledge of Allegiance and sang God Bless America. And as I was singing it, that was right after the ICE raids began in Pasadena, Los Angeles, and then Pasadena. And I grew up near downtown LA. And as a child, I used to walk those streets. We used to go to, church down at Third and Hope, and we would go into Clifton's cafeteria where they had the Garden of Gethsemane behind all the rattle and the noise in the outer part of the restaurant. Where you had your slid your trays on the table. They had a quiet room, and it was a life-size statue of Jesus praying. With just a light beam on him. It was very dark and cool and peaceful in there. I just remember that peace that I would have, sitting in the Garden of Gethsemane. And so I walked those streets, and I was really in pain over that because I was feeling, what was going on in my community, in my backyard with my people, Mexican American. And it was very very distressing and very painful. Thankfully, they moved out of there a little bit, but the spread of this illegality and this unconstitutional behavior, masked men in a car. I mean, would you willingly walk into a car like that? I don't think so. And so it's very distressing, and I think that that kind of action has really awakened people to the horrors of what is going on. There's no denying the reality when you see these things on television.
From Carter Heyward to
You
everyone
can
calling, I
unmute.
have been muted.
Oh, I don't know how that happened. There we go. Go ahead.
Can we bring it back up?
There we go. I realized I couldn't speak all of a sudden. Yes. Yes, absolutely. I mean, what is going on is just it's beyond terrible. This to me these men with and women, some of them, but mainly men with masks without any identification, without any accountability to anybody except themselves and the Trump administration. To me, it's like a legal making the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, legal in our time. I mean, and by that I mean it's a domestic terrorist movement. What's going on, and I understand that that we need some bounds and boundaries on immigration. I don't know anybody who doesn't agree that we need to have some kind of sensible, reasonable limits on how many people can come in at any one time. And I think creating that kind of comprehensive immigration system is something that needs to happen. And I'm sorry it hasn't happened yet. But in the meantime, to treat our immigrant neighbors as criminals to round them up and put them in detention centers and to treat your own opponents as enemies and to feel free to mess up and even kill people that make you mad, that is criminal and that is evil.
It is
And
evil, and we're seeing that in full bloom.
we are.
It's interesting. And back in the 80s, I was reporting for KCBS in Los Angeles, and I covered AIDS. I was the A reporter. I covered AIDS and amnesty at the federal amnesty
Wow.
program,
Wow.
and other stories as well. But the we had amnesty, and it was a legal process, and people were studying and learning the Constitution so that they could go through the process. It was a beautiful program, well run, well organized, and it died. It was the year was up, I think, in '96, and it's not been reinstated. It's been the Republicans that have refused to reinstate it. So they have deliberately failed to create a policy that is workable as that was. We need people to work in the United States.
We
There aren't too
absolutely
many
do.
people that want to go out and pick strawberries and do everything, which are entry-level jobs, and then you move your way up, and very quickly the families, they come in as a farm worker. My children's father's grandfather picked strawberries in Oxnard, where they did raids recently.
Yeah.
He picked strawberries. His son became a butcher and then a plant supervisor of an enormous meat packing company in Los Angeles. And the son became a California state assemblyman and state senator.
There you
So
go.
you have this
Yeah.
forward movement. I've met drivers, when I'm traveling, and they're often immigrants. And I was talking to one man who was from Guatemala, and I said, do you have children? He says, yes. He says, my older daughters are graduating from college. He says, one of them has her degree from UC Berkeley in biology. She's going to become a doctor. And the other doctor somehow got a Stanford scholarship and is graduating from Stanford, in a field of science or medicine. And so it's amazing what happens through the sacrifices that immigrants do make, and most are hardworking people. I like to throw out the figure that the uh, the national economic contribution of Hispanos Latinos is $4.1 trillion dollars.
Wow.
And it's enormous contribution that people have made in this country. California is a wealthy state, it's a progressive state, and 51% of our population here is Mexican American, is minority and mostly Mexican American.
That's
So
wonderful.
we're the driving force here in California, and now the doctors and Indian chiefs, and state legislators, et cetera.
Right.
So it's the discrimination is horrific. How can people of faith press more and harder and step up uh, across the country, and especially in these states which have Republican governors and legislators?
Well, I think actually I'm feeling probably more hopeful now than I was when you and I first met several
Mhm.
to do the first part of this presentation a couple of months ago, just because I think people really are stepping up throughout the nation in the red states as well as blue states. And of course, the Trump administration is specifically going after cities in blue states, as you know, as a way of trying to punish people who didn't vote for him, which is, he's like a 5-year-old. It's like the most ridiculous nonsense in the world, but there he is going after his opponents. But I think because farmers are hurting and because middle America is hurting, and I think it's going to become even more so as healthcare prices rise, as food prices continue to rise, as workers cannot be found for farm workers, as construction builders cannot be found because people are having to hide or else they're getting rounded up and taken away. This nation is going to be falling apart from the sort of from the middle out, I believe, and it's the middle that has been the reddest part. And I think that in some ways, I mean, it's so sad, and I hate that this is happening, but the people who are going to be hurt worst and first are going to be the very people that have put their faith in Donald Trump. So
Yes.
I think it behooves the rest of us not to refuse to. I mean, I think we have to speak truthfully, forcefully, emphatically. We have to resist the Trump administration. We have to be on the streets with our own No Kings protest and whatever else we can do. We have to be contacting our own senators, and both of my senators are Republicans, and I always get back these namby-pamby letters from them, which are just ridiculous. But we all have to do it anyhow. We have to just keep it coming. Well, right now, our big project in Western North Carolina is to make sure people vote, both in the primaries and certainly in November. So it's about registering votes, going to the colleges, making sure young people vote, helping educate people about what they should vote for without even, if you're in the NAACP, you cannot really come out and tell somebody to vote for the Democrats, but you can tell them what policies are going to hurt them and what policies are going to help them and let them, and who stands for what, and let them put the pieces together and help them put the pieces together. And that's what we need to be doing all over this nation. And I think people in red states will be waking up. I think many already are. That's what I think, and I think that's why the Trump's numbers are going down so quickly. He's down into the mid to low 30s now, I think, in most polls, and I'll be surprised if he's not down in the 20s by summertime.
And in November, I feel like you, I feel very optimistic.
I do
I
too.
feel that the transformation that's taken place amidst this horrific illegality and unconstitutionality and the brutality.
Mhm.
I think the reason that the ICE people are masked and with no identification is because they're the Proud Boys that were
They are the
pardoned.
they
Yeah,
are the 3%.
they're mixed in there because if it were legitimate law enforcement, they would be identified, there would be body cameras, there would be everything else involved in this. You wouldn't be just whisking people off the street with no due process.
No, you wouldn't.
So the violations are exaggerated and illegal, and I think people are responding so positively to pushing back. And I think it's just great because it's to me it reminds us of what went on during the civil rights movement and during the Chicano movement. You know, I remember we had a moratorium in East Los Angeles during the Vietnam War to oppose the war, and 25% of the war dead were Mexican Americans, and we only represented. I mean, 25% of the war dead were Mexican American, and we only represented 4% of the population.
Hmm.
And when they came back, they were not being given their rights. They were not being given employment. They were not being given housing. They were not being given health care. The discrimination continued during that period, which it shouldn't have, which is why the march was held, a peaceful protest. And unfortunately, a beloved journalist was murdered. There's a story about that never has really fully been
Mm.
shared publicly. The inquest was a sham. So there have been a lot of patterns of negativity, but I see a real turnaround. Maybe it's gotten so bad that people of good faith, and I think most people are good inherently, unless they can be manipulated into being also, otherwise.
Right.
And that has happened. And now I think that's starting to fall away because what is going on is brutal, it's ugly, it's dishonest. When you take a child out of its mother's arms,
Oh,
they're separating children from their mothers. God knows where they're sending them. You know, we have this sex scandal ring going on around the world. And remember, years ago, there were all those missing women in Texas. There were, I think,
Yeah.
hundreds of them. And then we had 22 to 2,500 women that came across in one of the first waves of massive immigration that came over. Those women just disappeared. And the
Yeah.
administration just said, "Oh, well, we don't know. We kind of lost track of them." Well, were they sent into that ring of sex ring of Epstein? So it's there's so much evil and ugliness, unconstitutional behavior that's going on that I think people are beginning to smell the rat
I think
and want
so
to
too.
have a change. So I feel very strongly that there's going to be a
Yeah.
turnaround in November
Yeah.
and that people will vote.
I think so
Um,
too. And I just hope, Yolanda, that as we begin to put the pieces back together, that we put them back together in a stronger, more sort of just way than they've ever been before. I mean, in other words, I don't think we should just start back and try to replicate everything that has been lost. I think we have to do it better. And when I say we, I'm really talking about people who are generations beneath us, because they're the ones who are going to wind up having to carry this load well into the future. But I hope that they will be able to make our nation a more economically just nation, because Democrats have not done well there either. Um, they've done better than Republicans, but we need to have we need to have a very strong social net that catches everybody. There shouldn't be a single hungry person in our nation. That's ridiculous. You
yes,
know,
it is. It
and
is
so
ridiculous.
nobody should be hungry, and nobody should be without housing if they really want housing, and everybody should be able to work at something. And and you're absolutely right about the immigrants. I mean, we have to have immigrants. I mean, we're all
We are a nation of immigrants.
are all of us are immigrants, unless we're native people, and and also African Americans are not by choice here, but certainly my people and your people. I mean, we're immigrant people,
Mhm.
and more power to us and to our people, and we need more and more like us. And have it just to have it to be selecting out Black and brown people and Asian people and wanting immigrants. I mean, this nonsense about wanting only white South Africans to come, for example. I mean, how outrageous is that? You know, the architects of apartheid to bring them into our country so they can do something similar, which Elon Musk is doing. Um, and that sort of speaks for itself. It's absurd. And Donald Trump would be just a pathetic man if he didn't have all these followers. If people were not kowtowing to him and bending the knee, he could not. I mean, he would just waste away as a pathetic human being.
Well,
But
it's a bully pulpit. I wanted to look at something that I just keep revisiting. I listened to a wonderful presentation by the Dalai Lama for the New Year, and it was very uplifting, very beautiful. And he has often said that women are going to be the ones who save the world.
uh,
And in your talk that you delivered, you at that commemoration, you talked about Sophia and about
yeah,
the inspiration of Sophia. Let's talk about that and what this feminine power is and how we can expand upon it.
yes, well, that is where the churches need to wake up to where the power really is, the creative power, the liberating power, and the compassionate power, and that is so much of that comes through. We can use Sophia as an example because she's a great Jewish and Christian figure. Um, it's the Greek word for wisdom, and originally the Gospel of John, the fourth Gospel of the New Testament, was in the beginning as Sophia. No, it wasn't the word; it was Sophia, and that got changed very early on into the word. In the beginning is the word. Well, the word's a very masculine image, but Sophia is a very uh, if Sophia is the wisdom of God who was with God in the beginning, who is God, really an image of God, then that casts a very different light on what the sacred power really is.
Mhm.
You know, it's as much a she as it is a he. maybe even more so in some contexts. And Christian worship should not be simply centered around the father-son relationship. It needs to be centered around images like Sophia. Certainly, the Catholic Church has always lifted up Mary, but the Mary that is lifted up has been a kind of an unreal woman, a virgin mother, because the Catholic Church has been so anti-body and anti-sex, and so of course both Mary and Jesus had to be celibate kinds of figures, or Mary could not have been allowed to be seen as sexual. But Mary Magdalene, by contrast, was seen as an actual woman. But Mary Magdalene, Sophia, Wisdom of God, uh, need to be given central places in Christian worship and in Christian theology. And I think if they were, and if more little girls could go into churches and hear themselves and see themselves imaged as not only as close to God, but even as God, that God is in their image as well as them being in God's image. This would make, I think, a very big difference to the future of the church. I think it's great that the new Archbishop of Canterbury is a woman. I mean, that's
Yeah.
shocking beyond words. I mean, I cannot believe that that happened, but I'm delighted. And but I think that to have the woman be the Archbishop of Canterbury and to still have a Eucharistic prayer that constantly lifts up the Father and the Son is really it's disjunctive. It makes no sense because every every woman is as much in the image of God as every man, and God needs to be seen in all of our images as in terms of gender. And that doesn't happen in Christian worship, and that needs to happen.
I was raised in a faith founded by a woman, Mary Baker Eddy,
Oh yeah,
and her definition of God, it was always Father, Mother, God.
and that's exactly
All
right.
harmonious, all powerful, yes, all loving, all wise. And that always stuck with me. I mean, I've been deeply influenced by her writing. And I grew up in a Sunday school, played the organ in Sunday school when I was in high school. And then I branched off and, got involved in New Thought, and I attended the Episcopal Church for 10 years. I love the Jewish faith. I've been doing Torah study, since COVID, with a girlfriend. I'm looking forward to backing into it. They had a little break because they were doing construction. I go to the faith. I do it virtually there in Santa Barbara. I'm here in the desert. Uh, so I love all of these teachings, and there is feminine wisdom, and I think more of that has to be drawn upon. And the this false notion of what the qualities are of male and female, because in a Jungian sense, we have both. And so the empathy and the kindness and also the braveness, we have these counterpuntal kinds of expressions that we have as human beings, and it has nothing to do with sex. It has to do with character. It has to do with the deeper aspects of one's personality
That's
and character.
exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah, we just need to have more and more of that, and I hope that we will. I hope that we will. And I think if we did, I think if the churches were more honest about all of this, about needing to bring more feminism and more female image, female power into the heart of Christian faith, we would have a stronger Christian tradition. And I think churches would quit hemorrhaging members the way they are. If mainline Christian churches stood for something strong and positive like that, as well as for just general making justice in the world, I think we'd be attracting members and not losing them. Because I think the ones who are going to leave because of justice have already left. They're the Christian right now, and I don't see them coming back anytime soon. But every young person in my own family uh, is at best marginal to the church because they've so had it with the church's refusal to speak up.
Well, I had that wonderful experience of, attending All Saints Episcopal Church of Pasadena with George Regas, who was a radical theologian and Harvard trained at that. So he was brilliant and passionate and long-suffering and so uplifting and very charismatic. And they took on issues. They were anti-armament back in the 70s when I was covering the news for KNBC, and they were uh, an underground railroad, during the time of Carter and in the Central American exodus, that the Underground Railroad that they created coming into Pasadena and elsewhere. And they were first to support women priests and gay marriage.
Yep.
It was a rock and radical church. It was fabulous to be there during the 80s and 90s.
He was a wonderful leader.
Yes. Yeah.
Truly one of the great leaders in the movement for the ordination of women.
And they have a very powerful, a really wonderful women's group that they have, a retreat every January. And it's I love the liturgy and I love I love the service, and that the St. Margaret's here in the desert where you visited and you did your book reading and you served you did the sermon on the Sunday was such a powerful weekend to see that feminine energy just expanding out there, and with all the love and the encouragement and the enthusiasm and the wonderful theological viewpoints that you shared. So I want to thank you so much for being you, Carter Heyward. I hope that you have many more years of standing up and standing out and speaking out and leadership within the faith community. We need to replicate you. And so thank you for the 50 years plus and for your ongoing work and commitment to uplifting everyone and making this a world that works for everyone.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be with you, and good luck to you too. You do such important work. Thank you, Yolanda.
Thank you, Carter Heyward. And to the audience, I want to thank you for joining us and listening today. And I want to encourage you to tune in next month because we have our Women's History Month honoree that is Nora de las Hoyas Comstock, who is the founder of Las Mujeres de las Americas. It's going to be a wonderful presentation and sharing of information and joy. And thank you for listening today. Thank you for joining me again. And I'm Yolanda Nava. Have a wonderful day.